Cancer, welcome to your weekly reading. Let's get started and see what messages we have for Cancer, Sun, Moon, and Rising positions. Keeping in mind that these are general readings and may not resonate for everyone. So make sure to check out your other placements to see if you have messages there as well. All right, Cancer, Sun, Moon, and Rising. Let's see, what is the energy around Cancer for the week ahead? Cancer. Okay, let's see any other cards here. We've got the Observer card coming out in the reverse with message in a bottle. Interesting. And on the bottom of the deck, we see the Flexible card also in the reversed position. Okay, so Cancer, what this says to me is that you're really being guided here to look at things from a different perspective. And in doing so, I feel like you could see things very differently, like there seems to be a situation involving some communication around you right now that it's almost like you need to look at this as you have to look at this from a different set of perspectives, maybe one that's unfamiliar to you. Maybe it's not the same perspective that you usually sort of adopt when you look at things. But what this is saying to me is that it's like you need to almost step back from something and have a look at it with some distance, that you could be too close to something. You know what I mean? You might be unable to sort of perceive something as having potential because you're not used to seeing it that way. You could be a bit stuck on something here. You might need to shift your perspective and your perception of a certain circumstance that's weighing heavy on your mind right now. And it feels like it has to do with communication. When I see message in a bottle there, you really need to be a little bit more flexible here so that you're able to be adapting and just able to sort of be mindful, right? Without that mindfulness piece, I feel like this is on autopilot. You have a certain way of looking at things, and it's like you're being guided to add some space between the thing you're looking at and your response to it. Because if you go into autopilot, you might say something here that you don't actually mean, or that it's very rigid, it's not flexible. This could be a time where you are just needing to sort of find the potential in something by being flexible. And that is going to be interesting. But this could be a way to bring in a new perception, a new perspective, shifting out of autopilot here when it comes to communication. So this says to me that you're like, in certain circumstances, you might find yourself sort of already having the words before it's time to speak, because you're so used to jumping into that pattern. And right now you're being guided to stop and not jump into any patterns, but to communicate here in a way that allows you to express yourself in a different way. More flexibility, less rigidity, really being adaptable and allowing yourself to become sort of almost allowing yourself to become someone who acknowledges what's happening before they speak. Do you know what I mean? Like, for example, I guess what's coming to mind for me right now is someone who is very used to seeing red flags in everything. So during a conversation with someone, you might be ready to respond before you even hear the whole situation, because you're so used to certain red flags that now you're seeing them everywhere. and it's like one of those things where whatever you focus on is going to expand. And if you've spent a lot of time focusing on spotting red flags because you don't want to find yourself in a vulnerable position anymore, I feel like you're just going to start seeing red flags everywhere. And then communicating from a perspective that says, I'm at risk and I have to protect myself, or this could potentially harm me, so I'm going to shut it down before it gets a chance. Do you know what I mean? Like having those kind of autopilot reactions to certain kinds of conversations. And there's no judgment here. I think that is something that develops as a defense mechanism when we have faced certain situations that did end up hurting our feelings or letting us down in some way. But that is a whole other conversation about expectations. But here, I feel like what you're being guided towards is to really be flexible with how you're seeing things. Yeah, because there's the Magician in reverse. As above, so below. So that's sort of like what I was saying with the red flags, is that if your mind is focused on the fact that there's threats everywhere and that I can't, you won't be able to really have a conversation with someone without picking up on something that feels like a red flag. And then you'll have a response that's one of defensiveness, And so seeing the Magician in reverse tells me that whatever your perception is, it needs to shift. You need to be more flexible and adaptable with your perception, and to sort of have this ability to see the wisdom in the experience that you're having without trying to change the experience. Change yourself. Does that make sense, Cancer? Like, the experience is the experience, and we are the ones that infuse meaning into that experience with the way we perceive it and the way we sort of label it as being good or bad. And so I really feel like we're seeing temperance in reverse here to get you to sort of release this idea that it's always the same outcome, that no matter what, it's going to be the same outcome. And so I'm going to use the same perception and the same perspective as I have before, because it's always like this. That's sort of how this feels. And I don't think that that's the case. I think here you have the opportunity to really look at something from a different perspective and to see here that you can practice moderation in your patience, that you can add space between words being spoken and you having a reaction based on this perception that you have that everyone's trying to hurt me or that I can't trust anybody. These are just thoughts coming to my mind here, that you're guarding against certain things happening again. You don't want them to repeat. And it's interesting because I think the overall quality of your emotion is a little blocked by fear and pessimism, and that there may be a need to sort of practice some gratitude here. And, I'll say this very gently, and don't ever complain about something that when you complain about things that you want to attract more of, that's the recipe that doesn't work, if that made any sense. So for example, let's say you have a business and you're trying to attract more clients. Don't ever complain about your clients. You know what I mean? Because then you're complaining about something that you're trying to attract more of, and that creates this sort of disharmony and lack of alignment between what you're trying to attract more of and what you have already. So that's where it's like you need to be grateful, express gratitude for your clients, and that will attract more clients. But complaining about something that you desire is not going to bring that closer to you. If anything, it's going to cause your mindset to be out of alignment with what you desire. Do you know what I mean? If your beliefs are out of alignment with what you desire, again, I bring it back to this idea of complaining about your clients. I see that so much in some interactions I've had with people who have their own business. And it always astonishes me a little bit to hear them complaining about their clients and saying, oh, how frustrating that client was. And I often think to myself, that is not going to help your business grow. You're not going to attract new clients that way. And so you can use that analogy and apply it to your own circumstance. So let's say, we see a lot of cups here. So let's say for some of you, this involves a relationship. And let's say you're trying to attract a certain kind of relationship, but all you do is complain about relationships and say things like, I always have this and I never have this. That is a very pessimistic energy, or the idea of comparing what's happening with you with someone else and saying, well, how come they have this and I have this? Again, it's interesting. It's like you have to shift your own energy first, and the way you communicate to yourself about what it is that you're desiring, it has to change. That has to change first before you'll see a change in what you're attracting. And I know that for a lot of people, that idea seems backwards, and they think, well, no, I'm just responding to what's happening around me, and that's normal. That's what everyone does. You respond to the external world, and that determines how you feel. But what if you flip the script on that and say, no, I determine how I feel, and that changes my outlook of the external world? Aha, very different way of observing things, a very different way of perceiving your reality. Instead of believing that I am responding to the external world, to believe that the external world is responding to you, that depending on what your mindset is, that's going to be what you find evidence for. So if you're complaining and feeling pessimistic and feeling a little blocked by fear and feeling like you have to protect yourself and being defensive, then I feel like that's what you're going to find evidence for. You're going to find evidence for the things that you're focused on. So this reading is really guiding you to change your focus and try to find the wisdom from all of the experiences, even the ones that made you cry. Laugh instead. Change the narrative. Find a way to flip the script on things in your perception and in your perspective. And I think you're going to notice a shift. You got to be flexible here. Not everything is a carbon copy of other things that you've experienced, right? But it could be seen that way if your mind is completely honed in on and focusing on those things repeating themselves. Does that make sense? Hope that makes sense. Let's clarify this. Sorry, the cards just keep falling. So the Magician in reverse here for you. Yes, you're really being guided instead of having your energy unfocused and having your energy sort of expanding on ideas that you don't want, to focus on what you do want and what you do desire, and then to have, inspired action behind that. You know what I mean? But I think that's going to take some flexibility for you, because right now I think you're focused overly on how things are a little bit not in line with what you desire, but then you've got to check what is your perspective on what you desire. Is it possible? Is it impossible? Are you complaining about it? Do you feel pessimistic about it? Queen of Cups in reverse. So more love is needed here. More self-love, more love in general, more gratitude, more forgiveness, more understanding, and looking at situations without taking them personally, to say, what did this experience teach me about myself? Because you could be missing something. When I look at that Four of Cups, you could be missing something. You could be missing this beautiful message of a new way of doing things, a new way of believing things, a new way of approaching things. And instead of feeling like you have to turn yourself off in the sense of like you have to be very guarded and you can't be open, you can't receive, you have to be very careful and guarded and protect yourself. Instead of holding on to feelings like that instantly tell your nervous system that you're at risk, I feel like you're being guided instead to adopt a perspective that says, I'm riding the waves of the drama without getting sucked into the drama, that I can be in an emotional space without being afraid. I know that I can overcome whatever circumstance I find myself in, and that part of this is all about your perspective and building a new foundation for that perspective to be built higher and higher. It's interesting, Cancer. I really feel like you're being guided here to sort of let go of past patterns. I just found myself looking at the bottom of the deck on the other side, the top of the deck, I guess, seeing the Devil, like breaking the chains to some ways of thinking that are impacting your experience, plain and simple. These ways of thinking are impacting your experience, they're impacting the way you communicate, and they're impacting your ability to shift your expectations and to believe that what you desire is possible. So I'm going to leave it at that. Very interesting reading for you this week, Cancer. If this reading has resonated with you, please consider subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting. I appreciate your support on the channel so much. And if you're looking for a personal reading, you can find the link for that in the description below. Okay, my friends, I'm gonna leave it here, and we'll see you again very soon for another reading. Take care.